At exactly 39 seconds into the hearing, Jasmine Crockett slammed a black folder on the table. Like a coffin hitting marble inside were 47 names of fallen soldiers who never even existed. Don Jr. blinked once, then twice, because the $3.2 million check with those ghost names he signed it himself. Cameras snapped. A Gold Star mother collapsed in silence. One veteran tore his service ribbons off his chest. What kind of man cashes in on the dead before they're even real? The hearing room looked like it had been dressed for television flags. Stiff microphones, polished air, chilled low enough to keep sweat from showing. Everyone played their part. Chairs creaked with formality, aides whispered like they were backstage at a funeral, and reporters watched through glassy eyes waiting for the usual fireworks to light and fade. Don Jr. sat at the center of it all, like a statue that smirked. His suit was sharp, his tie straighter than a ruler, and the American flag pin on his lapel winked like it had something to hide. He looked too relaxed, like the outcome had already been printed, like he wasn't here to answer questions, he was here to collect applause. My foundation, he said, voice smooth, as lacquer has proudly distributed over $3.2 million to families of the fallen. While others talk, we act. We don't just honor the flag, we support those who die for it. He paused and let the sentence hang polished and heavy like a trophy. Aides behind him nodded on cue. Across the room, a Republican senator folded his arms like he was watching a rehearsal. For a moment, everything clicked into place. This was supposed to be safe, predictable, scripted. And then Jasmine Crockett stood up. She didn't ask for permission, didn't clear her throat. Her heels clicked once, twice. And then the sound everyone remembered hit their ear. A black folder dropped hard onto the wood like a coffin lid slamming shut. The room flinched. The air tightened. Don Jr. leaned back, smirk unchanged. "What's that? A rebuttal?" His tone danced on the edge of mockery. Jasmine didn't answer. She opened the folder slowly, as if peeling the lid off something rotten. Then she spoke. Calm, controlled, too calm. "There are 47 names in this folder," she said. "All listed as dead soldiers, all listed as beneficiaries of Heroes United. And every single one of them is fake." The words didn't land, they detonated. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one even breathed. Aides froze. Reporters lowered their pens. The chair shifted uncomfortably, as if gravity had changed under his seat. Don Jr. gave a short laugh, thin and brittle. "You're joking, right?" Jasmine pulled out the first sheet. Private John H. O'Malley, killed in Iraq 2015. A red stamp across the page from the Department of Defense, no record found. Then another. Corporal Lisa Jameson, Afghanistan, no record found. She didn't read them all. She didn't have to. She laid them out like gravestones. Neat, quiet, each one more damning than the last. "These aren't clerical errors," she said. "They're ghosts, fabricated names, invented deaths. And your foundation paid out millions in their honor," the gallery murmured. Someone whispered a curse under their breath. Even the cameras seemed to zoom in tighter, as if trying to catch Don Jr. flinch. He didn't, but his hand stopped tapping the table. "I assume you have proof," he said. "Otherwise, this is slander." "I have more than proof," Jasmine replied. "I have receipts. I have emails. I have mothers who never got a folded flag but watched their sons' names printed on checks they never saw." The folder sat between them now, quiet, final, heavier than it looked. Jasmine didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She just locked eyes with him and spoke one more time. "You didn't honor the dead," she said. "You cashed in on ghosts." And she hadn't even opened page 2. What kind of empire forges sacrifice and expects the country to salute it? Don Jr. didn't move. His hands stayed folded, elbows tight to the table, eyes flicking down to the folder like it might bite. Jasmine Crockett was already opening page 2, her posture calm, almost surgical. The kind of calm that comes right before someone gets cut open. She didn't look at him, she looked at the names. "Let's start here," she said. "Private John H. O'Malley. You claimed he died in Fallujah 2015. Where's his grave, Mr. Trump?" No answer. She slid the document across the polished table like a dealer flipping a losing hand. Bold black font, clean formatting, and one thing stamped in red that didn't lie. No military record found. The words looked like blood on a clean sheet, and the silence that followed was louder than any denial. Next, Corporal Lisa Jameson, Afghanistan 2012. Same question: who buried her? Who wept beside her coffin? Another sheet. Same stamp. Same dead space in the air. Don Jr. opened his mouth but said nothing. His eyes narrowed, but the old smirk didn't come back. Jasmine was flipping pages now, steady and slow. Each name fell like a stone in water, pulling the room down with it. 47 in all, 47 ghosts. "These aren't typos," she said. "They're fabrications, full identities invented by someone. But the money you sent in their names, that was very real." Don Jr. exhaled sharply and leaned toward the mic. "I don't vet every name. That's not how a foundation operates." "You just sign the checks," Jasmine replied. He hesitated. "I trust the process. I delegate." These records came from approved sources. She looked up for the first time. Like Suite 142, the gallery rustled. The name dropped like a pin in a minefield. Jasmine pulled out the next file of Specialist Raymond Stokes, supposedly a Vietnam vet, death certificate typed in Comic Sans, listed address a parking garage in Delaware. Nobody in the room laughed. Don Jr. swallowed hard. You don't understand how logistics work. We know Jasmine cut in. What I understand is that a real mother somewhere is still waiting for a folded flag. Meanwhile, your foundation printed a ghost, gave him a fake rank, and cashed in sympathy like it was a Super Bowl ad. The chairman leaned into his mic, voice cautious. Mr. Trump, do you dispute any of these documents? I dispute the implication, Don Jr. said. You're twisting this. These are mistakes, not malice. Mistakes don't repeat 47 times, Jasmine said. Mistakes don't all list the same post office box in New York. One veteran in the gallery stood up and walked out without a word. His boots echoed across marble. His medals clinked with every step like they didn't want to be part of this room anymore. Jasmine looked back at Don Jr., her voice softer but sharper. Tell me, where are they buried? Pick one. Anyone. He said nothing. She leaned forward closer now. Not even one. He blinked, looked down, then away. And just like that, the myth started to collapse. The charity, the patriotism, the story. What do you call a war hero when his name was printed by a machine? The folder lay shut now. 47 names inside, none of them real. Yet each one had been packaged like a product sold to the American public under a banner of honor. Don Jr. stayed frozen, eyes low, hands tense. Jasmine didn't press because the next move wasn't words. She reached across the desk, tapped the touchscreen in front of her, and played a video. It started with wind, grainy home footage, a handheld phone tilted slightly to the right. The shot framed a cemetery, rows of white headstones stretching endlessly under a gray Texas sky. But one headstone stood out because it was blank. No name, no date, just a flag stuck in the dirt beside it. The camera slowly turned to a woman kneeling by the stone. She was older, face worn, black shawl around her shoulders. Her hands were pressed to the marble like she was trying to warm it. She didn't cry right away. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Until she did. They said he died a hero, she whispered, but they couldn't even tell me where he was. A pause. They sent me a thank you letter. Said his name was used to inspire donors. But he's not on any list, not even in their paperwork. Then the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Just slow, quiet sobs like something inside her had been broken so long it forgot how to scream. Someone in the chamber gasped. Jasmine said nothing. She didn't narrate. She didn't add commentary. The clip kept rolling. The mother kissed the cold stone. Behind her, flags fluttered. Above her, clouds hung like they were listening. When the screen finally faded to black, the room didn't move. No shuffling papers, no whispered objections, just stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes after something sacred has been shattered. Don Jr. looked pale now, like someone had turned down the contrast on his confidence. He started to open his mouth, but Jasmine spoke first. That was Mrs. Evelyn Klein, she said. Her son served 2 tours, died in Mosul. The foundation listed his name misspelled and paid $4,000 in his honor, but not to her, to a shell company in Nevada that's now dissolved. No one responded. Jasmine leaned in, voice low but ringing. You didn't just fake names. You buried real ones beneath the lies. The chairman stared straight ahead. Even the Republican aides had stopped taking notes. Someone in the gallery wiped their face with a tissue, trying not to be seen. Don Jr. finally spoke, voice hoarse. We never meant you meant to profit, Jasmine cut in. And you did, until someone found the stones with no names. For a moment, it felt like even the cameras were unsure where to look. Jasmine picked up the black folder again, holding it like a flag that no one wanted to carry. She looked around the room, then asked the only question left. How many fake deaths do you need before you kill a nation's conscience? The folder sat untouched, heavier now, with everything it revealed. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. This time, she didn't play a video. She didn't raise her voice. She picked up a letter. Old, folded 3 times. Edges curled like the hands that wrote it were shaking. She held it up gently, not for show, but as if it deserved to be handled with care. Her voice didn't rise. It slowed, as if every word carried weight, as if even the ink had pain soaked into it. This came in the mail, she said. No press, no platform, just a woman with a stamp and a son in the ground. She opened the letter and read, Dear Ms. Crockett, I'm not good at writing. I don't know if you'll see this, but I saw your name once on TV and I prayed you were real. The room held still. My son, Corporal Darren Grady, died in Ramadi. He was 22. He liked orange soda and playing the trumpet. I sent $500 to Heroes United. They said they help mothers like me. No one moved, not even the cameras. They sent me a thank you card. It said Darren's name had inspired thousands. It was signed by someone named Captain Evan Hale. But when I asked about Captain Hale, the letter came back. No such person. Jasmine looked up. The woman who wrote this is Helen Grady, Kansas, lives alone. Her son is buried in Arlington, Section 60. The man who signed the letter to her, he never served, never died, never lived. A soft murmur rolled through the gallery. No one said a word, but every pair of eyes asked the same question. Jasmine turned the page. She wrote one last line. I never told anyone, not until now. Don Jr. shifted in his seat, fingers curling slightly against the desk. His voice came low. Anyone can write a letter. That doesn't prove anything. Jasmine didn't even look at him. Who created Captain Hale then? Because the Pentagon has no record. Not on duty, not retired, not buried. The chairman leaned forward but didn't interrupt. $500, Jasmine said, from her husband's pension. In return, she got a thank you note signed by a ghost, printed from a database full of lies. She folded the letter slowly, carefully, then placed it beside the list of names. Her hands didn't shake, but the silence in the room did. She didn't offer a conclusion. She didn't need to. The paper said it all. Some people bury their sons. Some bury the truth with them. And some, like Helen, are left to wonder what part of their grief was ever real. How many mothers have opened envelopes, only to find someone else's lie folded inside? The letter was back in the folder, but the tremor it left hadn't settled. Jasmine Crockett adjusted the mic, her tone steady, colder now. The grief had passed. What remained was arithmetic, and arithmetic didn't lie. She tapped her tablet. A screen behind her flickered to life, revealing a flowchart with names, arrows, percentages. It looked like a wiring diagram for something designed to short-circuit the truth. Let's talk numbers, she said. Heroes United raised a total of $12 million over 3 fiscal years. According to public records and the Foundation's own reports, 83% of those funds were designated for Gold Star families. Jasmine paused. 83% sounds noble, responsible, almost heroic. Until you follow the money. She highlighted a cluster on the chart. 7 shell companies all filed in Delaware. Names like Liberty Aid Partners and American Valor LLC. Every single one shared the same registered agent. Every single one funneled cash back to a central account. That account, she said, belongs to an entity called Patriot Finance Holdings, which operates out of the 48th floor of Trump Tower, Suite 4820, right next door to Don Jr.'s private office. A hush fell over the room, the kind of hush that feels like a fuse being lit. Jasmine let the silence breathe, then delivered the line. Those families you claim to help, she said, they do have something in common. They all live in the same zip code as your elevator. Don Jr. stiffened. He didn't speak, but the vein in his jaw twitched. She pointed again. Of the $9.8 million reportedly disbursed to survivor accounts, over $6.1 million was rerouted within 24 hours, deposited into Patriot Finance, then redistributed to related entities. Don't take my word for it, Jasmine said. This data comes from the IRS 990 filings, cross-referenced with FinCEN alerts, verified by 2 whistleblowers who processed these transactions, both of whom now live under protective status. The chairman opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Jasmine continued. Heroes United didn't just lie about soldiers. It created entire financial ghosts, phantom widows, invisible children, whole households of grief built from nothing but paper and ink. And when someone mailed in a real check from a real mother like Helen Grady, it vanished into the same black tunnel, swallowed by a loop of flags and ledgers and patriotic branding. Don Jr. finally leaned forward. His voice was low-strained. You're implying I orchestrated a criminal network? I'm not implying anything. Jasmine replied. I'm showing you where the money went. She pulled out a folder labeled 4820. Inside were lease agreements, bank routing numbers, and a signed vendor invoice made out to a consulting firm housed 1 floor above the suite in question. Consulting for what, Jasmine asked. Grief management. The gallery shifted. Even the marble underfoot seemed colder. This wasn't mismanagement. It wasn't even negligence. It was a machine. One that took pain, repackaged it, and sold it under a different name. So when a mother like Helen gives her last $500, who does she really feed? The air had barely settled when the side door creaked open. No announcement, no camera movement. Just the soft sound of footsteps against stone. Heads turned before they understood why. Helen Grady entered without a word. She wasn't escorted by a team of lawyers or flanked by press. She moved with the weight of someone who'd carried too much for too long. Her coat was faded. Her shoes were plain. And in her hands, she clutched a letter she hadn't meant to make public. A staffer guided her to a seat in the second row. Jasmine didn't look at her right away. She didn't need to. Everyone in the room already felt it, like a window had cracked and cold air had slipped in. No microphone picked up her breath, but her silence was louder than Don Jr.'s entire defense. Jasmine adjusted her mic and turned forward. She didn't pause. She didn't dramatize. Her voice cut clean. What does it feel like, Mrs. Grady, when your grief becomes someone else's profit? Helen didn't hesitate. Her voice didn't waver. It wasn't loud, but it was full. "It feels like theft," she said. "Not of money, of memory." She looked down at the paper in her lap. "They used Darren's name. Then they sent me a letter signed by a man who never wore a uniform. I never asked for a check. I only wanted to know how they even found his name." And no one ever answered. Don Jr. kept his eyes fixed forward, but something in his posture slipped. The tension in his shoulders told the truth his mouth couldn't touch. Helen's voice stayed steady. "Darren loved jazz. He played trumpet until midnight sometimes. When he deployed, he left his mouthpiece on the kitchen counter. I keep it in a drawer now. And then your charity used his name to raise money for a 4th of July concert in Tampa, with a brass band." The irony hung so thick you could feel it settle across the chamber. Jasmine let it sit. She didn't interfere. She didn't need to. Helen looked up. "I buried my son at Arlington Section 60. The government gave me a folded flag. Your charity gave me a thank you card signed by a ghost. All I wanted was for his name to be left alone." There was no command, but applause started in the back. It was soft at first. Then it grew. Not loud like a rally, not polished like politics. Just people clapping for a mother who didn't cry on cue. Don Jr. turned away slightly, as if avoiding the light. Or the truth. Jasmine leaned into the mic again. "You can fake a name. You can fake a title. You can fake a story. But you can't fake a mother's grief." No one clapped this time. No one moved. It was the kind of silence you feel in your ribs. Because grief may not raise its voice, but it never lies. The applause had faded, but something heavier remained in the room. Not silence, expectation. Jasmine didn't step back. She leaned forward. The time for emotion had passed. Now came the evidence. She pulled a single page from a red folder. Thick paper. High gloss. The kind of document meant to impress donors, not withstand scrutiny. It was a check, large ceremonial, framed in color. At the top, Heroes United Foundation. At the bottom, authorized signatory Donald J. Trump Jr. The number was clear. $3.2 million. She held it steady like a prosecutor holding a weapon in court. "This," she said, "is your legacy's signature. Dispersed to 21 supposed families of fallen heroes." She paused, then added, "Except 16 of them never existed, and 5 died before the year 1995. The tension cracked like ice beneath a boot. She clicked the remote and the screen behind her filled with a spreadsheet. 21 rows. Names, dates of death, amounts, paid delivery addresses. Then the final column, status, red text. 16 lines read, "No record found." 5 read, "Deceased pre-1995. None had military confirmation." Jasmine kept her voice calm, steady. Line 15, Sergeant Andrew Ballard. Allegedly killed in Syria, 2019. Payment $175,000. Verified Ballard died in a car crash in Illinois in 1987. She moved to line 8. Captain Melissa Rhodes. Claimed to be a Marine pilot lost at sea, but the zip code listed belongs to a UPS drop box in Manhattan. Don Jr. stiffened, his jaw locked. He didn't speak. Not yet. Jasmine pointed to line 4. Lance Corporal Samuel Ortega. Hero of Helmand Province according to your newsletter. Payment $142,000. But Ortega never served. His name appears only once in a screenplay draft rejected by Netflix in 2016. A gasp cut through the room like a knife. She turned back toward Don Jr., voice sharp but controlled. "This check was cashed. This spreadsheet was filed with the IRS. This is what your charity sent to America, while mothers like Helen got ghost letters and empty condolences?" Don Jr. broke the silence barely. He muttered, "That was handled by outside vendors. We trusted their documentation." Jasmine didn't blink. "You trusted them with your name, your signature, your patriotic branding. But you never trusted America enough to check if her sons were real." The chairman shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. Someone in the gallery murmured, but no one interrupted. She held up the check again. On the back is an endorsement. Patriot Finance Holdings. Same suite, same building, same man. Don Jr. looked down, not out of shame but calculation, like someone trying to remember who else had seen the document. Jasmine tapped the table once. "This isn't just mismanagement. This is laundering grief into reputation. This is forgery dressed in red, white, and blue." She looked to the panel, then back to the gallery. "When you sign a check in a dead soldier's name, how much of that ink is blood?" Jasmine didn't sit down. She didn't change tone. The room was still in the grip of that check, $3.2 million, billed on ghosts. But she was already moving to the next cut, the next unraveling. "Let's talk location," she said. "Because when money leaves a body bag, it always ends up in a building. And this one went home." The screen behind her changed. A blueprint lit up crisp and clinical. The interior map of Trump Tower. Jasmine didn't point to the top floors or the ones branded with gold. She went lower, to a quiet corner on the 12th floor. Suite 142. A small rectangle on the floor plan glowed red. According to leasing records, Suite 142 has been registered since 2019 to Patriot Finance Holdings, the same entity stamped on the back of the Heroes United check. Jasmine zoomed in. The room is listed as a storage unit. No windows, no mail delivery, no office staff. Not a single person is employed there. Don Jr. shifted, slowly, deliberately. His hand moved across his tie, then back to the table. The cameras caught everything. Caught the flush climbing from his collar to his ears. But he said nothing. Jasmine stepped closer to the screen. "This is where the money went," she said. "Every donation meant for a grieving family. Every sympathy dollar from a retired veteran in Ohio or a single mother in El Paso. Routed to a storage room with no desks, no computers, no life." She clicked again. The transaction records appeared now. 11 separate transfers, each one under $500,000, spread across 4 months, split between shell companies, all tied back to the same routing number, Suite 142. The room felt colder, not just from the air, from the weight. Don Jr. opened his mouth, but the words didn't follow. He reached for his water mist, then settled his hands flat against the table as if bracing for something. Jasmine didn't blink. The suite has no security footage, no registered employee access. The building log lists only one visitor during the disbursement period, Donald John Trump Jr. He looked up finally, but there was no smirk now, no line ready, just breath. The map on screen changed again, this time showing interior photos. Rows of plastic bins, metal shelving, a single wooden chair. "This isn't an office," Jasmine said. "It's a vault. For documents no one wants to answer for." The chairman leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Mr. Trump, do you deny entering Suite 42? Don Jr. didn't answer. Not directly. He cleared his throat. "I've worked in many parts of that building. I don't recall specifics." Jasmine tilted her head. "You forgot the room where $10 million stopped breathing." No one laughed. She let the final image linger. The chair, the bins, the silence. And then she turned back to the mic. What kind of charity hides its heroes in a room no one dares unlock? The image of Suite 142 still lingered on the screen. A room without a name, a vault of silence. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. If the money trail had led to a door, then what she held now was the key. She reached for a sealed document inside her folder. Manila. Stamped. Heavy with ink and implications. "This isn't a leaked memo," she said. "This is the original grant approval, signed by the Board of Heroes United for the disbursement of the $3.2 million check." She flipped it open, laid it flat on the table like evidence in a trial. Page 1, names of fake recipients. Page 2, routing details. Page 3, signature lines. She pointed to the bottom right corner. Donald J. Trump Jr. in black ink. Not printed, not copied, signed, dated, endorsed. The room shifted. No one spoke, but the tension recoiled like a wire pulled too tight. Don Jr. didn't blink, but his face had gone stone white beneath the studio lights. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She turned the document slowly to the final page. A post-approval note from the foundation's CFO, written in pen. The handwriting slanted, rushed, almost casual. "Need to keep these numbers patriotic. Add 5 more ghost names if needed." She read it aloud. A single breath drew in from the gallery, sharp as glass. The words weren't abstract anymore. They were orders, instructions, a formula for faking loss and marketing sacrifice. Jasmine leaned on the table with both hands. No theatrics, no politics. Just the plain truth delivered like a blade. "You didn't just approve the check, Mr. Trump. You signed the lie that made it possible. You authorized the myth, and your team padded it to make the grief feel more American." Don Jr. tried to speak, but the words caught like gravel in his throat. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes moved toward the chairman, but no help came. The document stayed on screen, now zoomed in on the signature. The ink had started to fade slightly from age, but the message hadn't. Jasmine stood silent for a moment, letting the image speak louder than anything else could. She reached for the mic one last time. "How many fake heroes does it take to keep your yacht afloat?" No one clapped. No one spoke. But the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of names, of lies, of receipts that had finally come due. And the man at the center of it all had nowhere left to look. The signature still glared from the screen when Jasmine Crockett turned to the clerk. One nod and a name was called. A man stood up in the back, his movements tight like someone walking into their own memory. He wasn't a politician, wasn't a whistleblower by choice, just a man who'd sorted too many files for too many years in too many rooms no one talked about. He walked to the witness table, took the oath, and sat down. Nervous fingers touched the edge of the mic. His badge was plain. His voice wasn't. "My name is Thomas Beach. I worked for Trump Organization from 2013 to 2022 as an administrative coordinator. I handled internal transfers, document shipments, and courier authorizations. That's all I did." or so I thought. Jasmine kept her tone level. "Mr. Beach, were you familiar with Suite 142? His eyes dropped. Everyone in that building knew what it was. They just didn't say it out loud. "Go on, it was always called the dead drawer. A joke, I think. Maybe not. No one worked there? No desk? No phone? Just metal shelves, 2 locked cabinets, and 1 chair with a broken leg." The room quieted again. That kind of silence that leans in. Thomas shifted. "Every Friday I was instructed to send sealed envelopes to Suite 142. No return address, no barcode, no electronic log. I used Apex delivery. Always hand-delivered. I never asked what was inside. Why not? Because they told me not to. They said it was just reimbursements. Some weeks it was 1 envelope. Some weeks it was 5. One time it was 8. And all of them thick, like they held more than just paper." Jasmine walked to the evidence table and picked up a cream-colored business card, held it up to the room. "Apex Delivery Group." On the back, handwritten in black ink, "Deliver to Suite 142. Personal. No scan." The date matched the Heroes United payout schedule 7 days after the $3.2 million check was issued. "Who gave you this card?" "The Trump Org Finance Office. They told me it was the standard courier. But I only used that contact when the envelope said Suite 142. "Did anyone ever sign for them?" "Never. There was no lock. I just slid the envelopes through the door slot. But one time I came late. The door was open." "What did you see?" "A man in a red hat, MAGA embroidered across the front, wearing gloves, moving bins. I couldn't see his face, but he used the elevator on the west wall, the private one, the one tied to Don Jr.'s office." Don Jr.'s eyes dropped for the first time in over an hour. His smirk had vanished. What replaced it was something colder. Still, like the center of a storm right before it breaks. Thomas pulled a copy of the envelope label from his folder. No logo, no sender. Just one word printed across the top in all caps: settlement. Jasmine took it, set it beside the business card. Her voice didn't rise. "This is where the money went. Not to wives, not to children, but to a room with no return address and a man who never signed for it." The chairman sat back slowly, as if the truth had pushed him. And Thomas Beach, who once filed paper like it didn't matter, looked across the room and said the quiet part out loud. "I thought I was just mailing envelopes. I didn't know I was sealing coffins." Thomas Beach's final sentence still echoed in the room. "Coffins sealed in envelopes." The words hit harder than any document could. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She didn't need to raise her voice. All she had to do was open a letter. She pulled a padded envelope from her folder, yellowed around the corners. The tape was still intact on one side, torn on the other, like someone had opened it with shaking hands. Inside, she held up a typed letter, branded, polished, headed with the red and blue logo of Heroes United. This, she said, was mailed to Corporal Mason Keene of Illinois, a decorated infantryman, 2 tours, Bronze Star, killed in action, Kandahar 2015. But this letter, it was dated March 22nd, 2022, 7 years after he died. The words settled like fog. Jasmine unfolded the paper and read from the top. "We at Heroes United would like to thank you for your recent contribution to the Legacy for Valor program. Your generosity ensures that the sacrifice of American soldiers lives on." It was signed by the executive director and postmarked with a return address leading directly back to Trump Tower. Someone in the gallery let out a soft gasp. No one else spoke. The lie was no longer hypothetical. It had a timestamp. Jasmine held up the envelope itself. On the front, the name was typed in bold, clean ink, but the address was slightly off 1 digit from Mason's family home. A neighbor down the block received it by mistake. That neighbor, an Army widow, recognized the name. She knew Mason, knew he'd been buried with full honors in Section 34, Row 19. She walked the letter to Mason's father. He opened it at the kitchen table. He didn't speak for 5 minutes. Then he folded it, taped it back shut, and mailed it to this committee with only a note inside that said he's been dead 7 years. Stop thanking him. Don Jr. sat frozen. His fingers no longer moved. His face locked in place like he was trying not to hear any of it. Jasmine lowered the letter gently onto the table. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a system so disconnected from humanity, it didn't know the dead when it wrote to them. She pointed to the bottom of the page beneath the signature, a line offering the opportunity to donate again and become a Freedom Partner. The camera zoomed in. The signature belonged to a former Heroes United board member who now worked full-time at Patriot Finance Holdings. Jasmine looked at the panel, then turned slowly toward Don Jr. "How does a man who's buried for 7 years still end up on your donor list?" He didn't answer, and that silence in a room full of facts felt heavier than guilt. Because when the dead start receiving receipts, the lie has already outlived the truth. The letter to Corporal Mason Keene was still on the table, but now it was no longer a single tragedy. It was a symptom. Jasmine Crockett didn't reach for it again. She stepped back from the documents, back from the ink and the signatures, and turned towards something colder, something that couldn't be signed away. With one press of a button, the screen behind her lit up not with spreadsheets or graphics, but with a photograph. The image was simple: a metal shelf, a wall of gray, and on that shelf, stacked in uneven piles, were over 100 padded envelopes, all unopened, all marked with the Heroes United seal. "This is sweet," 142 Jasmine said. "Not imagined, not alleged. Real." No one spoke. No one had to. She tapped again. A second image appeared, this time a wider view. Crates lined up like caskets, labels handwritten in red marker: Gold Star Pool, Family D-List, Backup Set 4. Beneath the boxes, dust. Evidence that no one had touched them, not in weeks, not in months, maybe not ever. These were not active files. They were artifacts, sealed grief preserved like inventory. Jasmine's voice stayed steady. These envelopes were meant to be mailed, some addressed to names that don't exist, some returned, many never sent. But none went to real families. Don Jr. didn't lift his eyes. The color in his face had drained, replaced by something harder to define. Not embarrassment, not even guilt, just a hollow stillness. Another image flashed on screen, an open drawer full of profiles, each one with a soldier's name, photo, rank, and story. Jasmine pointed to the page numbers. Some were missing, some repeated. Service numbers were duplicates, the photos stock images, pulled from public databases, faces that had never worn a uniform in their lives. At the bottom of each page was a 4-word stamp, prepared by PH Division, Patriot Holdings. The lights dimmed slightly as the final image appeared. A narrow chair rusted at the joint, sitting alone in the middle of the room. No desk, no computer, just the chair, facing the shelves, facing the ghosts. This wasn't an office, Jasmine said. It wasn't a filing room. It was a bunker for fraud, a quiet place to keep the lie from breathing too loud. She paused. Let the image burn itself into the record. "One by one, your donations went here," she said. "Not to caskets, not to folded flags, not to widows. Here." The photo froze on screen. The chair, the shadows, the emptiness. And then her voice cut through it like a scalpel. "When you build a room of ghosts, how long until they come for the living?" She looked at the panel, then at the camera, then at the empty seat across from her. "And what happens? When one of them is ready to speak," the screen was still frozen. Suite 142 glowing in silence when Jasmine signaled to security. The back door creaked, and in walked a man with a limp and metals that didn't shine. They carried weight, not polish. Major Nathaniel Brooks didn't need introduction. His name was stitched onto every command board from Kandahar to Fallujah. 30 years, 6 deployments, Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, the kind of soldier they make monuments for. Unless your pain isn't profitable. He sat slow, not because of age, but because of what he carried. The room shifted. Even Don Jr. blinked twice, unsure if this was scripted or a detour. Jasmine didn't give him time to recalibrate. "Major," she said, "tell them what Heroes United told you." Brooks cleared his throat once. No microphone needed. His voice had the stillness of someone who had spoken orders over gunfire. "I applied for hardship assistance. My left leg, well, it's not mine anymore. My wife left when the meds ran out. I asked for help with my son's school fees. I sent them everything: records, scans, even a photo of my prosthetic with my service tag." He reached into his coat, pulled out a single sheet of paper. Jasmine took it, unfolded it gently, and read, "We appreciate your service, Major Brooks. However, due to limited narrative alignment, your case does not meet the emotional standards required for public engagement." Jasmine folded the paper once more, then set it beside the ghost files. The contrast hit like a gunshot in a church. "Limited narrative alignment," she repeated. "They rejected a Purple Heart because he wasn't pitiful enough for a fundraiser." The gallery rippled. Someone gasped. One woman in the back muttered, "My God," like it was her first time saying it in years. Brooks didn't flinch. "I didn't need a handout," he said. "I needed a partner. Instead, I was told I lacked marketing value." Jasmine clicked to the next slide. It showed an internal memo from Heroes United, highlighted in yellow, focus on single mothers, orphans, tragic injury stories. "Avoid clean-cut veterans, low click-through rate." Don Jr. tried to interject, but Jasmine raised a finger, silent, surgical. "This isn't just about stolen names," she said. "It's about erasing the real ones that don't bleed pretty for the cameras." She turned back to Brooks. What did it feel like? He looked her dead in the eye. "Worse than war. At least in combat, the bullets are honest." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was holy. A kind of hush that demanded respect, not commentary. And then Jasmine leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "How do you decorate a hero and then leave him off the brochure?" She held up the rejection letter like a flag stripped of color. How many real soldiers had to be erased to make room for the ghosts? She let that hang. And in the front row, Don Jr.'s hand clenched the table just tight enough for his knuckles to turn bone white. The silence in the chamber lingered like smoke after a battlefield shell. Jasmine didn't speak right away. She let the weight of Major Brooks's quiet pain settle before lifting a single sheet of paper, creased, aged, but damning. It was his original application for aid, the one he sent months before. She held it up for the room to see, then tapped twice to bring it onto the screen behind her. Typed answers, military commendations, records from 3 deployments. Everything neat, respectful, complete. But at the bottom in sharp red ink, one handwritten note, too stable. Lacks tragedy. Some in the audience squinted, hoping they'd read it wrong. Brooks didn't flinch. His hands rested calmly on the table, but his jaw locked like a vault of buried frustration. Jasmine spoke low, but clear. That's what this country told him. You serve too cleanly to deserve help. Then came the second sheet. He didn't stop there, Jasmine said. He wrote a letter, a personal one. She unfolded a small piece of stationery, yellowed at the edges. It was addressed directly to Donald Trump Jr. The camera zoomed in as she read. I served without complaint. I buried men who never got a funeral. I'm not asking for pity, just a little help for my son. If you're reading this, I trust you'll remember what America owes its soldiers, not just in war, but in peace. The room held its breath. Jasmine laid the letter flat, letting the words burn into the screen like a scar on the nation's conscience. Then she dropped the next slide. He never got a reply, but that letter wasn't ignored. A donor pitch appeared on the screen. Subject line, help real heroes like Nathaniel. Below that, a stock-style blurb and an anonymous photo. No last name, no identifying details, just enough to pull at wallets without honoring the man behind it. Brooks shifted slightly in his seat but still said nothing. Jasmine didn't need him to. She placed one last document under the camera, Heroes United's internal ledger. Line item 324, Brooks file package, $2,500 under content engagement. They didn't help him, she said, voice tight. They harvested him, filed his grief, sold it. Trump Jr. looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair, but there was nowhere to run. Not from numbers, not from truth, not from a man who gave 30 years and got packaged like a slogan. Jasmine faced the panel, her voice quieter now but razor sharp. You turned patriotism into a pitch deck. You turned a veteran into a prop. You didn't just fail him, you used him. And then came the line that stopped even the cameramen from breathing. If this is how you treat our quiet heroes, how many more are buried in folders marked not dramatic enough? For several seconds after Jasmine's words landed, no one dared to move. The air felt loaded thick like thunder was waiting just beyond the walls of the hearing room. Then, without being asked, Major Nathaniel Brooks slowly rose from his chair. He didn't speak. He didn't glance around for approval. He just turned to face the committee and lifted his right hand in a precise, disciplined salute. Not a show, not a cry for pity. It was the kind of salute carved by decades of duty, a gesture trained into the bones, not the camera. And somehow that silent motion cut deeper than any testimony ever could. The sound of a single camera shutter echoed across the floor like a drum beat in a funeral march. Trump Jr. looked down. One of his aides whispered something, but he didn't respond. Jasmine didn't look away from Brooks. She watched him hold the salute for a full 5 seconds, then lower it with the dignity of a man who knew he'd never be thanked properly for anything he'd done. That's when she spoke, voice soft, but heavy with steel. This is what real service looks like. Silent, dignified, and discarded. She stepped closer to the mic, eyes never leaving the back of Brooks's upright frame. Not wrapped in slogans, not packaged in ads, not measured by how much airtime your pain can sell. She paused just long enough for the silence to build again, then dropped the final line like a pin in a cathedral. You didn't need him to be real. You just needed him to be marketable. Behind her, the screens flipped through slides, donor emails, charity posters, campaign newsletters, all boasting pictures of veterans with slogans like True American Spirit or We Stand Behind Our Heroes. Jasmine let them roll. None of them were Brooks. He had never been used in a single campaign, and that somehow was the worst cut of all. She looked toward the back row where donors once sat before the hearing cleared them out. Because he didn't cry on camera, because he didn't fit the brand. She turned to face Trump Jr. directly now, her voice sharpened. Tell me, does a veteran stop being a hero when he's not profitable anymore? No answer. Brooks returned to his seat, his face unreadable. But his silence roared louder than any politician in the room. Jasmine ended the segment without flourish. Just one final question tossed into the air like a grenade with no timer. If he wasn't useful to their brand, was he still a soldier? The hearing had crossed a line. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice once, but the walls were closing in, and Donald Trump felt it. His breathing turned sharp. Then, like a thunderclap out of nowhere, he slammed his fist against the table so hard the microphones buzzed. This is a witch hunt. She's a liar, a disgusting liar. The whole room flinched. Cameras jerked to catch his face, red, furious, gleaming with sweat. He pointed a trembling finger across the aisle. You're not a congresswoman. You're a con artist in lipstick. You're trying to destroy my family's name for attention? But Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. She turned calmly to the technician and raised one hand. A click, a buzz, and suddenly the screen behind her lit up with surveillance footage. No narration, no explanation, just grainy black and white security cam footage from inside Suite 142 at Trump Tower. A man in a blazer walks in, then out carrying a duffel bag marked HU Jasmine, spoke voice like a scalpel. That's Alan Robeson, Heroes United Logistics. The date is May 8th. The duffel bag contained $317,000 in cash. Trump's mouth opened, but no words came. The video kept playing. A second man entered 5 minutes later, pulled open a metal drawer behind the file cabinets. From it, he removed a small red box and placed a sealed envelope inside. Jasmine didn't look at the screen. She looked straight at Trump. That envelope was addressed to a fake widow in Kansas. She died in 1999. Trump stood now, fully. His chair screeched back against the marble. "You don't have the authority. This is garbage evidence, fabricated stage." Jasmine didn't answer. She nodded to the screen again. The next clip showed a close-up from the lobby security feed. Trump Jr. himself walking into the building at 8:27 a.m. on that same day badge, scanned briefcase in hand. Jasmine whispered into the mic like a funeral prayer. This is the only time Donald Trump Jr. visited Suite 142 that year. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt weaponized. Staffers stiffened. Reporters looked like they'd just witnessed a power outage in heaven. Jasmine finally turned her body toward Trump. Eyes calm, voice precise. "You wanted a show. You got one." Trump fumed, nostrils flaring, but his eyes darted to the footage playing behind her frame by damning frame. Jasmine slowly reached into her folder and placed one final item on the table, a certified wire record of the $317,000 transfer from Heroes United to a shell company registered in Panama. 3 days later. The room was paralyzed, and then she asked the one question no one in Trump's orbit ever wanted to hear. If this is fake, why does every ghost in this story know your door code? The screen didn't fade to black. It cut to something raw, shaky, grainy, and never meant for the public. A hidden camera angled slightly upward from inside what looked like a conference room. The logo on the podium read, Heroes United, Strategy Session, date stamp 6 weeks before the hearing. Jasmine's voice cut through the silence. This is what they said when they thought the cameras were off. At the center of the frame stood Donald Trump Jr., sleeves rolled, pacing like a man on Wall Street, not a man funding funerals. Around him sat 6 aides, some nodding, others frozen in disbelief. He stopped to look straight at the group and said it. Dead soldiers sell better than wounded ones. The room where the hearing was held didn't breathe. You could hear a pen drop, or maybe just the sound of morality being sucked out of the air. One Republican congressman dropped his pen, stood up slowly, and left the room without a word. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't blink. She simply leaned in and let the weight of that sentence hang like smoke over a battlefield. Trump Jr. in the video kept going. Sympathy spikes when there's a coffin, not a cast. We need to lean into that. One woman in the back turned her face away. Another jotted something down. Jasmine froze the frame right there on the face of the aide scribbling notes. That's Margot Green, now Director of Veteran Outreach for the Trump 2028 campaign, she said quietly. Trump Sr. sat slumped in his seat, jaw-twitching fingers, tapping the desk in a frantic Morse code of denial. He didn't shout this time. He didn't slam the table. He just stared at the screen as if willing it to shut off. But it didn't. Jasmine clicked forward. Another clip. Same room. New day. Trump Jr. again. The death rate makes for cleaner headlines. People don't argue with folded flags. The room groaned. Not the one in the video, the real one. In the Capitol. On live television. America watched, not blinking. Jasmine's tone didn't change. They used our grief as branding. She played one final excerpt. It was Trump Jr. holding up a mock-up ad with a black and white photo of a young Marine and the tagline, his sacrifice. Your donation. He looked proud. We made $2.1 million in 3 days off this run. That's the kind of patriotism that pays. Jasmine turned off the screen. The room sat like a funeral without flowers. She didn't lecture. She didn't yell. She just asked one question, soft but thunderous. How do you sell freedom? By turning the dead into a revenue stream. And just when it felt like no more shocks could come, Jasmine leaned in again and whispered, Want to know who designed the campaign ad that broke the $2 million mark? Trump Jr. didn't stand, he erupted. Chair legs scraped the floor like metal on bone. His voice cracked from something deeper than anger exposure. You ambushed me. You think this is justice? This is a setup. Jasmine didn't move. Her eyes never left him. She didn't raise her voice. No, she said, calm as a closing door. I gave you the floor. You buried yourself. Gas flickered through the chamber like sparks in dry grass. One aide leaned back, visibly shaken. The committee chair rapped the gavel once, but even the wood sounded hollow now. Trump Jr. looked around as if searching for an exit that no longer existed. He grabbed a printed speech from the table, waved it like a white flag. My father started that charity to honor the troops, he shouted. If there were mistakes, it's because we trusted the wrong people. But no one looked convinced, especially not Jasmine. She stepped forward not aggressively, but deliberately like a prosecutor who knew the verdict had already landed. Let's talk about trust, she said. You trusted that no one would check. You trusted the uniforms would silence the questions. You trusted America's grief to be blind. Trump Jr. reached for a bottle of water, hands trembling. A bead of sweat rolled from his temple. He looked less like a businessman now, more like a man watching his own biography catch fire. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She underlined. This isn't about politics, it's about principle, she said, voice anchored in steel. When a soldier's name becomes a tool, when a mother's grief becomes a tagline, when a folded flag becomes a logo, that's not patriotism. That's branding. The audience sat stone still, locked in the collision between power and conscience. Even the opposition hesitated, unsure whether to defend or flee. One camera zoomed slowly on Jasmine's face, serene, unshaken, merciless. Trump Jr. barked again, voice ragged. You're just putting on a show. Jasmine's reply came without hesitation. I'm not the one who sold death on TV. Silence fell again, but this time it was heavy, punishing. Jasmine picked up a single document, held it up just high enough for the cameras to see. This is a thank you letter from Heroes United, sent to the parents of a child who died in a car crash, not in combat. His name was used without permission. His face photoshopped into a fake deployment photo. His life turned into a lie for profit. Trump Jr.'s jaw clenched. He had no more outbursts left. No one rushed to his defense. Jasmine finally stepped back, voice dropping into something almost sacred. So I'll ask just one question before we move on. She paused, and every heartbeat in the room seemed to wait with her. When mourning becomes marketing, what flag do we salute? She didn't say a word when she reached beneath the desk. No dramatics, no buildup, just a slow, deliberate motion, like drawing the final card in a game no one wanted to lose. Out came a folded American flag, tight, sharp, tucked into perfect military triangles. The kind handed to widows in cemeteries after a 21-gun salute silences everything but grief. Jasmine stepped forward, flag in both hands, like it weighed more than memory. The room didn't breathe. The gavel didn't move. Even the lights seemed dimmer, as if respect had dimmed the voltage. She placed the flag on the table directly in front of Trump, and only then did she speak. This flag was requested in 2018 by a family in Michigan. Corporal David H. Brooks, 24 years old, killed by an IED in Kandahar. They filled out the paperwork, waited for months. She looked up and her voice turned blade sharp. But the flag never came. Trump Jr. leaned back like the cloth might explode. He glanced at his counsel, but no one moved. His lips parted, but no words followed. The silence filled the chamber like rising water, cold, suffocating, inescapable. Jasmine tapped a manila envelope beside the flag. Instead, the family received a condolence letter from Heroes United. It was signed by a Major Carl Jensen. She pulled out a page. That man does not exist. That rank never served. That title is as fake as the sympathy it carried. There were no gasps now, only the stunned hum of a nation realizing it had been sold its own mourning back to itself. Jasmine didn't flinch. I called the mother last week. She didn't cry. She said she'd already used up every tear. What she asked was something simpler. She looked Trump Jr. in the eye. She asked if there would be justice not for her son, but for the flag that never made it home. Trump's knuckles were white on the desk's edge. No notes, no talking points, no rehearsed patriotism to hide behind. Jasmine let her hand hover over the flag. Do you know what it means when a flag never gets delivered? She asked, voice low, steady, lethal. It means the sacrifice was acknowledged by no one. It means the blood dried without honor. It means we asked someone to die for a country that couldn't be bothered to remember. The flag didn't move. Neither did he. Then she said more to the room than the man. This isn't just a piece of cloth. It's a promise. And when that promise is broken not once, but systematically, what do we have left? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Because that flag in its stillness spoke louder than any accusation ever could. And now the question wasn't just for Trump, it was for all of us. What kind of country folds a flag and forgets who it was folded for? The room had barely begun to recover from the weight of the flag when the back doors opened. Heads turned not at the sound of authority, but of soft sneakers scraping tile. A boy no older than 12 walked in, holding something too big for his hands, a folded letter yellowed at the edges. His hair was combed, his shoes polished, and his face, though still full of childhood, was stretched thin by something far older. He didn't look left or right. He only looked at Don Jr. Jasmine didn't say a word. She stepped aside. The cameras pivoted, and for once no one whispered. The boy climbed the 2 steps up to the witness microphone like he was stepping into a memory he didn't ask for. His voice didn't shake. My name is Caleb Henderson. My dad died in Afghanistan when I was 5. We never got his flag. He looked straight at Don Jr., then lifted the letter. But last month we got a check. It said, "Thank you for your service, Corporal Henderson." But he's been dead for 7 years. Gasps didn't come. They couldn't. This wasn't a scandal anymore. It was something more brutal. Something so human it stopped language in its tracks. The boy kept going. My mom cried. Not because we got money, because it was signed by someone she couldn't find. We called the number. It went to voicemail. His grip on the paper tightened. "Uncle Don, why did you send my dad a thank you check after he was dead?" Don Jr. stared at the tabletop like it might swallow him whole. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, didn't breathe loud enough for the mic to catch. Every light in the room focused on his silence. His head dipped, not out of shame, but weight. The boy held out the check. Jasmine stepped forward and took it. She unfolded it slowly, let the cameras drink it in. Same handwriting, same signature, same nonprofit name. Jasmine turned to the boy. "Would you like to keep this?" Caleb shook his head. "It's not real," he said. "My dad never cashed anything. He only gave." In that moment, the truth no longer needed permission. It stood taller than every flag, louder than every dollar. Jasmine gently rested the check next to the unused flag. And as the boy stepped down, shoes echoing louder than gunfire, the question that hung in the air wasn't his alone. It belonged to every family watching. When a child knows the truth before the country does, who failed who? She didn't move at first. The room still rang with the echo of a boy's question, one that no man in that chamber dared answer. Jasmine stood behind the microphone like a verdict carved in flesh and steel. Her eyes scanned the faces, then turned toward the lens. And in that blink of silence, she aimed not at the men before her, but at every American watching. "This flag," she began, her voice even wasn't folded for the fallen. It was folded for your fraud. She raised the cloth with both hands, slow and deliberate. It caught the light not as a symbol of honor, but as a mirror of betrayal. No one spoke. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. She walked to the witness table and laid the flag gently, not before Trump, but between him and the boy's empty chair. It landed with a weight no one could measure, not in dollars, not in damage, but in dignity. Then she turned again to face the nation eye's steady voice, now tighter, sharper. "You bought names. You printed tragedies. You mailed fake thanks with real blood still wet in the sand." Her hand gestured to the photos, the files, the ghost list now spread across the table like crime scene evidence. But this country was not built by headlines. It was built by sacrifice. Don Jr. sank lower in his seat, eyes, glazed lips pressed so tight they lost their color. His father no longer shouted, no longer smirked. He just stared at the flag as if it might come to life and asked for repayment. Jasmine leaned into the mic one last time. "Whose blood built your country?" she said, her tone barely a whisper, but heard by millions, and whose silence lets you sell it. No one moved. Then without another word, she stepped back. The lights dimmed. The flag remained. But now beneath the harsh studio lights, something became visible. Barely a streak faded and rusty near the folded edge of the cloth. A dried stain, almost like blood. No one spoke of it. No one needed to. Because when truth walks in, not with a gavel, but with a folded flag stained by silence, there is no need for noise. The screen faded to black. A single note low, hollow aching echoed beneath the silence. Some wounds don't need tears, just a forgotten flag and a child's question in a silent hearing room. When patriotism is sold and the fallen are turned into numbers, silence itself becomes a kind of betrayal. Will you let lies rewrite history, or will you help preserve the truth for the next generation? Share this story if you believe the truth should never be sealed in unopened envelopes. If this story made you stop and feel something, don't just scroll past it. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories, where silence doesn't mean surrender and every memory matters. Tap the bell, because the next revelation won't just shake the room, it might shake the nation. Which moment struck you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. Let's not forget, let's stand witness together. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. Truth doesn't fade. It waits quiet, patient, until someone's brave enough to listen.